Morning, learners. My name is Mr. Pochilola once again. We meet now to revise the 2026 St. Mary's Biology Paper 1. This is mock exam. If you are watching us on our YouTube channel, which is called Black Slides Online Secondary School, consider subscribing to the channel. And also remember to hit the notification bell so that every time we upload a new video lesson, you should be notified on time. Welcome, learners. So this is revising 2026 St. Mary's Biology Paper 1. This is the paper which was written by the students as their mock exam. St. Mary's is in Zomba. Of course, there is another St. Mary's in Nicaronga, but this particular one is the one in Zomba. Welcome, learners. It is a privilege for us to have access to this biology paper. In my evaluation, this paper is a very good paper and worth going through together. So welcome, learners. Invite your friends wherever they are to join us on this platform. In case you have questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section below. Welcome, learners. These revisions are going to continue up to the end of this month when you will start your exams. Exams, I understand, are starting on 29th of June, which is barely 13 days from now. Welcome, learners. So without much ado, get to the business of the day. So once again, this is Biology Paper 1 from St. Mary's Secondary School in Zomba. It was written on Tuesday, 5th April. The paper is 2 hours long. This is a standard paper. The money paper is also 2 hours long. And it's 100 marks. Welcome, learners, once again. So welcome to section A. In this section, the candidates were asked to answer all the 8 questions. This section, of course, the standard paper has 10 questions in section A. I think for some reason or another, this paper had 8 questions in this section. So we are going to answer the 8 questions in this section. Usually it continues to say in the spaces provided. Take note that the money paper will have 10 questions in this section and 3 others in section B, like altogether 13 questions. Welcome, learners. So without much delay, question 1A is saying state 2 parts of the brain. As a biology student who is waiting to sit for MSCE exams, You should know the parts of the brain very well. So the question is simply asking for two parts of the brain, 2 marks. That means each part is 1 mark. Just to remind you, the brain has parts called cerebrum without describing what each one of them does. Cerebrum, cerebellum also has a part called medulla oblongata. It also has a part called hypothalamus and the thalamus. Know these parts, all of them. As a matter of fact, since you are preparing for the MSc exams, I would encourage you to go ahead, read the notes on these parts of the brain and what each one of them does, the function of each one of them. It's not part of the question, but in just an extension, find time to read about the parts of the brain and their functions in case the examiners come July may ask you for the functions of the brain. Part B, mention any two excretory products. These are the waste products produced by different organs in your body. They're called excretory products because they are produced by a process called excretion, which is the removal of waste from your body. So we are asked to name any of these wastes. They're called excretory products since they're produced from excretion, which is the removal of waste from your body. So name any two marks. Just like here, number 1A, you were asked to name two parts of the brain. Doesn't mean that you should write down all of them, no, just two. If you write all of them, the marker, the examiner will just mark the first two and will not mark the rest. 2 marks. Mention any two excretory products. Well, there are many excretory products, but the question is asking you for just two of them. All right, so there are quite a number of them. Excess water is one of them. This is the one that is removed from your body through the skin by sweating. It is also removed through urination. So when you urinate and sweat, your body is just trying to remove excess water or extra water. Excess means extra. The water which is not needed at that moment by your body. So it has to be gotten rid of from your body. It has to be removed by the process called excretion. It can be through sweating or it can be through urination. Other ways include carbon dioxide. There's also carbon dioxide which is excreted from our body through the lungs through a process called exhalation, which is breathing out. So when you breathe out, you're technically or basically removing carbon dioxide from your body. Carbon dioxide must never be allowed to accumulate in your body because it is going to turn into a poison. As a matter of fact, carbon dioxide will turn into carbonic acid, which may cause complications to your body cells. So this has to be removed from your body through the lungs. Another one is excess salt. Excess salt is also a waste or excretory product. It's removed by the kidneys. It's removed from your kidneys through excretion. Another one is urea, which is made from the liver by a process called deamination. Remember, deamination is the removal of excess amino acids, which are broken down into urea, and urea is a toxin. It doesn't have to be allowed to accumulate in the body. There must be a means to get it excreted from the body. And it's removed from the blood by the kidneys as a product. You pass it out through urine. Urea. So these are excretory products. Another one is biopigments. Biopigments, or simply bio. Biopigments are produced in the liver and they excreted from the body as excretory product. This again must never be allowed to accumulate in the body. Welcome learners, this is Black Slides Online. As an extension to the question, I will urge you to go ahead to look at the process by which each one of them is excreted from the body. Welcome learners. In case you have missed a point, don't hesitate to reach us on the numbers shared here, and we'll be glad to rectify anything that we have not made it clear in the first place. Welcome learners. Invite your friends, wherever they are, to come and join us on this platform to learn from us. No one should be left out. That's our motto. No one should be left out. Everyone has the right to learn and pass their examinations. This is a paper from St. Mary's, Zomba, one of the best girls' schools in the country. Welcome, learners. Part label C is the pancreas. This one here, this is the pancreas. So what are the functions of the pancreas? Right. So the pancreas performs two well-known functions. One of them is to produce insulin and glucagon. These are hormones which regulate blood sugar. By saying that, you have one mark. So insulin and glucagon are hormones that regulate blood sugar or glucose in the body. Other than that, it produces pancreatic amylase. Pancreatic amylase is a chemical, is an enzyme, is a starch digesting enzyme. All right, so it produces pancreatic amylase for chemical digestion of starch in two maltose. So for chemical digestion of starch in two maltose. So when amylase, which is also called ptyrin, acts on the starch changes to disaccharide sugar, which is called maltose. Remember that starch digestion begins in the mouth but doesn't end there. Some undigested starch is digested by amylase in the small intestines, especially in the duodenum, by the action of amylase. This is pancreatic amylase or pancreatic stearin. Welcome, learners. My name is Mr. Pochilola, your teacher. This is Black Slides Online. To get in touch, just send us a text message to any of these numbers. Mention one way in which the stomach is protected from the action of each of the following. Hydrochloric acid. Recall that there is hydrochloric acid in your stomach. It performs a number of functions. One of them is to aid in digestion. As you know, it also kills bacteria, which might be swallowed by you when you're eating food. Apart from softening bones, let's say you swallowed meat bones or fish bones to the stomach, before they damage your stomach, they need to be softened. That's done by the HCl, hydrochloric acid. But sometimes it is a danger to have hydrochloric acid in the stomach because it can start eating the walls of your stomach unless the stomach is protected. So the question is, mention one way in which the stomach is protected from the action of each of the following. So the stomach is protected from the corrosive effects of hydrochloric acid by the fact that the stomach lining secretes a thick layer of mucus. The stomach lining itself protects itself from being digested or from being eaten by the corrosive hydrochloric acid, in that the stomach lining secretes a thick layer of mucus that causes the inner lining to act as a barrier to prevent the acid from damaging the stomach tissue. So the mucus that the stomach lining secretes prevents the acid from damaging the stomach tissues, because the mucus acts as a barrier to prevent the acid from damaging the stomach tissue. Welcome, learners. My name is Mr. Paul Chilola once again. But other than that, in the stomach is where protein digestion begins. And sometimes, if the stomach does not have mechanisms to protect itself, the enzymes can start reacting with the lining of the stomach, thereby digesting it. So imagine your stomach being digested. So thankfully that doesn't happen, because there's a means by which nature protects itself, the stomach. So the stomach is protected from protein digestive enzymes from being digested, right, by these enzymes, in that the enzymes are produced and released in an inactive form. In other words, the enzymes are not active to act on the proteins yet when they're being produced. Example is pepsinogen. Pepsinogen is an inactive form of pepsin. This only becomes active once it enters the stomach cavity, when there is food for it to act on. So it does not digest the stomach cells. So we are saying the enzymes are produced and released in an inactive active form, for example, pepsinogen, which only becomes active once it enters the stomach cavity. And it does so when food is available. So it doesn't digest the stomach's own cells. Welcome, learners. Consider subscribing to the channel so that every time we upload a new video lesson, you become the first to be notified. Welcome to number 3. So referring to figure 2 showing a human embryo in the uterus, a human unborn baby. Wow. So use it to answer the questions that follow. So once again, it is advisable to scrutinize the diagram when it comes. Just look at the parts which are named and those that are not. So we have here the omnion, which is a sac that encapsulates the baby. And then we have the uterine wall, the wall of the uterus. And then we have this part must be placenta, this one, this is placenta. And then we have this, what looks like a string, this is umbilical cord. This must be umbilical cord. It establishes a connection between the mother and the baby. Wow, nature is so beautiful. The baby is surrounded by a fluid marked A. This is called the amniotic fluid. Amniotic fluid or amniotic fluid, as sometimes people call it. So, what are the questions? Name the part labeled B and C. So B is the umbilical cord. Umbilical cord connecting the mother to the baby. Life is so beautiful. It begins humbly like that. Let me take this opportunity to remind you or to ask you to make thorough revision on the role of the umbilical cord and the placenta, the functions of these things, and the blood vessels that connect the mother and the baby, such as the arteries and the veins, and what each of them carries. It's important that you do that. This is just a small diagram, it's a sketchy diagram, but there are diagrams that explain this bonding between the mother and the baby. So make sure you look at the functions of the placenta and the umbilical cord very well as the amnion and the uterine wall and the amniotic fluid there. So this part is the umbilical cord, and then this is the placenta. State any two functions of the part labeled A. Part labeled A is amniotic fluid, this one which surrounds the baby. It's the medium in which the baby is birthed. The baby is so free there in the fluid. Wow, very moist place. Nice. So it surrounds the functions of the amniotic fluid is to surround the fetus and keeps it moist. The baby doesn't have to live in a dry environment in the womb there. No, it needs to be in a moist environment. So that's taken care of by the amniotic fluid. So take note, this A is amniotic fluid. Unless you knew what it is, it would be difficult for you to say this. That's why you need to know the parts, labeled parts of diagrams, including this one. Apart from that, it gives the fetus a stable environment and cushions it from physical damage and shock. Let's suppose that something has hit the pregnancy outside. The force must not affect the child inside. That's prevented by the amniotic fluid, which is here, this part. So it gives the fetus a stable environment and cushions it from physical damage and shock. This is not electrical shock. Shock here refers to the forces that may be impacted on the pregnancy of the mother. It's not electric shock, as some of you are thinking. Shock here refers to the forces that may be exerted on the pregnancy of the mother. So to prevent the forces from damaging the baby there, the fluid is going to resist any physical forces and damage. Welcome, learners. My name is Mr. Pochilola, your teacher. B. Mention the two permanent methods of birth control. Birth control is a means of ensuring there is proper child spacing. All right, to avoid giving birth anyhow within short intervals of time. Something needs to be done. There are many ways of doing that. There are some that are permanent and others temporary. The permanent ones include the tubal ligation, which involves the cutting of the oviduct in females in order to hinder the movement of the egg through the oviduct. So the oviduct is cut and tied on both ends so that the egg, once released from the ovary, doesn't get to the oviduct for fertilization. So there's a gap between the ovaries and the oviduct, so the egg cannot cross over to the other end where fertilization occurs. That's called tubal ligation. It's a permanent method of birth control, meaning it cannot be reversed unless with advanced medicines or surgery. But in its own, it's a permanent method. Another one is what is called abstinence. Abstinence is a deliberate choice of not having sexual intercourse. In so doing, one cannot get pregnant and give birth. Sexual intercourse is needed in order to have pregnancy and give birth. So when one abstains or stays away from having sexual intercourse, there's no way pregnancy can come. This too is permanent as long as one upholds the choice of not having sexual intercourse. Another permanent method is vasectomy, which is applicable to men. Vasectomy involves cutting the vas deferens so that the sperms do not reach the vagina through the vas deferens or through what are called sperm ducts. So this is cut and tied on both ends to avoid transfer of sperm to the vagina. These are the permanent ones. So let me urge you to also look at the temporary ones. Temporary ones include use of pills, condoms, intrauterine devices, and others. Even with withdrawal method, all those are temporary ones. So know both the temporary and permanent methods of birth control. The question asked us for 2. So don't write all these 3, just write any 2. Unless the question requires you to write 3. Let me urge you to know all of them so that in case you're asked for either 1 or 2, you should be able to give. Describe any 2 problems of the reproductive system. The reproductive system is affected by a number of problems. The question is asking us for 2. For 4 marks, we need to describe. So mention it and then explain it. That's 2 marks. Mention it and explain it. Another 2 marks to make 4. All right, so one of the problems that the reproductive system faces is sterility. Sterility is the inability of an individual to reproduce due to poorly developed reproductive organs and failure of the reproductive organs to produce gametes. That's called sterility. So when one is sterile, means that that person cannot reproduce. And the problem comes because the reproductive organs are either too small or too poorly developed, too small or too poorly developed, but also inability or failure of the organs to produce sperm if it's in men or to produce eggs if it's in women. That's a problem affecting the reproductive system. Another one is maternal mortality or death of mothers. That's matern. Matern means having to do with mothers. So it's the death of mothers. So maternal mortality due to excessive bleeding during birth or infections. This must be infections. There's an I that was omitted here. Infections during pregnancy, especially by malaria. So this can lead to death of mother, which is called mortality death. So bleeding leads to death because you know that bleeding leads to loss of red blood cells, which makes one die of anemia. So the mother can die of anemia in the course of giving birth. We must do all we can to avoid this, to avoid the death of mothers. Mothers are the precious gift to us. Therefore, we need to prevent their deaths during birth. No one should die because of giving birth. No. We must try to avoid malaria as much as we can so that we don't lose mothers. Welcome, learners, to Black Slides Online Secondary School. If you have not already subscribed to the channel, consider doing so now so that you don't miss on any of our content when we upload it. Remember, we are revising one of the best papers in the country from St. Mary's, Zomba. Welcome, learners. Question number 4A. Mention any two adaptations of pulsed mesophyll layer for photosynthesis. Mention any two adaptations. How is the pulsed mesophyll? This is found in the leaf, by the way. All right, just look at the structure of the leaf. Find it has a layer called pulsed mesophyll. So, what are the adaptations of it which enables it for photosynthesis? I think this question is a repeat, not quite a repeat, but it relates directly to the question about the leaf, adaptations of the leaf, which we met earlier on. Mention any two adaptations of pulsed mesophyll layer for photosynthesis. Right, so it contains many chloroplasts. Chloroplasts contain chlorophyll, must know that, which absorbs sunlight needed for photosynthesis. The fact that there are numerous chloroplasts to enable it to attract, to absorb sunlight needed for photosynthesis. Bear on your mind that it's not the chloroplast that absorbs sunlight, it is the chlorophyll which is contained in the chloroplast that absorbs sunlight needed for photosynthesis. Welcome, learners. The cells are located just below the upper epidermis, closer to the surface, where they receive maximum amount of light for photosynthesis. So the pulsed mesophyll layer or cells are located just below the upper epidermis, which is closer to the surface of the leaf, where they receive the maximum amount of light. So these are the two adaptations. You can read more about more in your notes. You should also be able to find others. In case you are asked for more than 3, you should know all of them. Welcome, learners, to Black Slides Online Secondary School. Give the function of each of the following cell organelles. Cell organelles are the parts of the cell. So one of them is the ribosomes. There are many organelles in a cell. We have the mitochondria, the cell membrane, the nucleus, the vacuole in case of plant cells, the cell walls in case of the plant cells, the cell membrane, and the others. The endoplasmic reticulum, just to name a few. Make sure you know all the functions of the parts. But here we are asked to name, to give the function of each of the function of the ribosomes and the cell membrane. Welcome, learners, to Black Slides Online Secondary School. All right, so the ribosomes are the sites of protein synthesis. It's where proteins are synthesized. The parts of the proteins are assembled there to make proteins. ribosomes. The cell membrane is to hold the use of the cell membrane is to hold or enclose the contents of the cell. So the contents of a cell are inside the membrane. It's like a house holding the different parts of the cell. It also regulates the movement of materials in and out of the cell. It controls what enters the cell and what leaves the cell. The substances that enter the cell and those that get out of the cell are regulated by the cell membrane, because you know that cell membranes are selectively permeable. They are semi-permeable, meaning they allow certain materials to enter and they prevent others from entering the cell, as well as to come out of the cell. So two functions here we have mentioned: to hold or enclose the contents of the cell and to control what enters and what leaves the cell. Describe the process of glucose formation in the dark stage of photosynthesis. Remember that photosynthesis takes place in stages. There's what we call the light stage, which is the first one, and the dark stage, which is the second one. Remember that in the light stage, light from the sun is used to split water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen ions. The oxygen is released to the surroundings of the plant, but the hydrogen is used to combine with carbon dioxide in this next stage, which is called the dark stage, to form glucose. So the question is asking us to describe the process of glucose formation in the dark stage of photosynthesis for 3 marks. So 3 marks. First, the carbon dioxide diffuses into the stroma. There's a part of the leaf called stroma. From the cell cytoplasm, carbon dioxide moves from the cell cytoplasm to the stroma. The hydrogen from the light stage, which is the first stage of photosynthesis, combines with carbon dioxide to form glucose. 3 marks are coming from the fact that carbon dioxide diffuses into the stroma from the cell cytoplasm. 1 mark. The hydrogen from the light stage, another mark, combines with carbon dioxide to form glucose. Welcome, learners. Question number 5. State any 2 mechanisms that enable water to move up the xylem. Remember that the xylem transports water and mineral salts. So there are mechanisms that take place to enable water to move up the xylem. That's from the roots through the stem all up to the leaves. So there are 2 main mechanisms that enable water to move up the xylem. So the mechanisms include cohesion and adhesion. We shall treat this as one. These are forces, by the way. So water molecules stick together, that's cohesion. The water molecules are not like sand particles that can separate as they move. No. the water molecules are joined together by forces which are called cohesive forces. So the water molecules stick together, and they also stick to the walls of the xylem vessels, which is called adhesion, from the word adhere, forming a continuous column of water. So water moves like a stream. Water is just one stream moving from the roots going up through the stem to the leaves where it's needed for photosynthesis. So the fact that water molecules can stick together, they're not just scattered like you see sand particles or something. They stick together. So the sticking together of the water molecules is called cohesion. And the water also sticks to the walls of the tubes, the vessels in which it's flowing. That's called adhesion, forming a continuous column of water. This maintains the movement of water from where it is coming, the roots, all the way roots up to the xylem, up to the leaves through the xylem. Another mechanism is what is called the transpiration pool. Transpiration pool involves water, evaporation of water from leaves, which creates a suction force. The water is always like being absorbed or sucked from the lower parts of the plant upwards. So there is a force called suction force. Evaporation of water from the leaves creates a suction force that pulls water upwards through the xylem. So these two are the mechanisms by which water moves up the xylem. Take note. Don't say anything else. When this is the question being asked, you have to give these 2 points for you to get 2 marks. Give any 2 sources of variations in animals. All right. I'm not sure whether the question was asking for sources or causes. All right, but we shall take this to mean causes or sources. Our responses are still going to be the same. Variations in animals. Variations in animals come as a result of age. For example, when the animals are growing, some of their features change. Features such as body mass, height, body size, and appearance in general change because of age. So as organisms grow, their appearances change. Like humans, when humans are growing, body mass changes, height changes, and the general appearance also changes. Like if in humans, the face changes, may become wrinkled as one grows. So age is one. Another one is heredity. This is inheriting characters from parents. Right? Another one is change of environment. If you change an environment, let's say you have lived in Blantyre for some time, and then you go to the lower Chile where it is hot. Over there, your skin color may change. Your appearance may change. Sometimes you can also get sick. The sicknesses due to change of environment can also affect how you look. There's variations. Sometimes you can also, your genes can undergo some changes through a process called mutations that can bring about variations in organisms. Another one is meiosis, whereby the chromosomes from mother and mother are blended together at at crossing over, in which case some traits, the chromatids from the mother's chromosomes and that from the father's chromosomes, can bring about different characteristics in the organisms, in the offspring. So know all of these. Mention any two problems associated with biotechnology. While biotechnology is good, it has problems associated with it. Sometimes there are risks of unintended environmental harm, such as genetically modified MGOs, organisms disrupting natural ecosystems. That's one. Another one has to do with ethical concerns, including issues related to genetic modification of humans or unfair access to biotechnology benefits. So, read about many of these in order for you to be able to write even more than two when you're required to do so. Explain how genetic counseling can improve human life. Genetic counseling can improve human life in a number of ways, but the main one is that it helps the parents to know the risk of passing on inherited disorders, allowing them to make informed decisions about having children and plan for proper care, thereby reducing suffering and improving family health. So, how does genetic counseling? So, you can go for counseling genetically from the experts, meet the experts to talk to you and your wife, you and your partner. Once that is presented and shared to you, it will allow you to make decisions whether you still have to go ahead, have children, let alone you still have to go ahead to marry and have children. It would also help you to plan for proper care of the children, thereby reducing their suffering and improving their family health in general. So that's beneficial to humans. Describe how natural selection brings evolution. Natural selection, how does it bring about evolution or change of organisms? Variations exist, differences, that is, exist within a population. Organisms with favorable characteristics or traits will survive. That's what natural selection states. Reproduce and pass on their genes, while those with less suitable traits or characteristics are going to die or fail to reproduce. Right, so over the generations, the favorable characteristics become more common, leading to a change in the species, which is called evolution. 2 marks, so each point is a mark. Welcome, learners. Question number 6, figure 3 is a diagram of a section of an aquatic system. Use it to answer the questions that follow. Construct a possible food chain. So let's identify the organisms involved here. We have the phytoplanktons, which are fed upon by fish, and then we have a bird that eats the fish. So the food chain here, the flow of energy will be from the phytoplanktons to the fish and then to the birds. This is the food chain from this relationship. Remember that a food chain shows the flow of energy. It doesn't necessarily show who eats who. It shows the flow of energy. So energy flows from the planktons to the fish. When the fish feed on the planktons, they gain energy from it. And the fish pass on the energy to the birds. Which organism should be part of the population with the greatest biomass? So the greatest biomass comes from the producers, in this case the plants. The phytoplanktons are plants, right? So the planktons will have the largest populations or largest biomass because they are the producers and form the base of the food chain, having the greatest biomass. The producers usually are at the base of the biomass, pyramid of the biomass, meaning that they are in larger numbers than the other organisms. Which one would be on top of the pyramid of numbers? The ones that will be on the pyramid, on top of the pyramid of numbers, is going to be the bird. Why? Because it is the top consumer in the food chain and occupies the top of the pyramid of numbers. Take note. So the top consumer here is the birds. So it will stay on the top of the pyramid of numbers. Welcome, learners. My name is Mr. Paul Chilola, your teacher. Consider subscribing to the channel so that every time we upload a lesson, you become the first to know. Name the source of energy in the ecosystem. In any ecosystem, the source of energy is the sun. Or you can say sunlight if you want. It's one and the same. Describe how the removal of primary consumers, which in this case the fish, can affect the food chain. So removing the fish from the food chain, from this ecosystem, take note that the fish is the primary consumer in the food chain, this food chain here, the planktons, fish and birds. So if we remove the fish, what's going to happen is that the population of the plankton should increase because there will be nothing to eat, to feed on them. So the fewer fish would be feeding on them. So removing the fish means there would be more of planktons. So the population of birds would decrease because they would have less food available. If you remove the fish, the birds will not eat the planktons. So the fish, due to insufficient number of fish, the birds are going to reduce because there will be no food for them. They will die due to starvation. Welcome, learners. Question number 5. In a breeding experiment, a pure black mouse was crossed with a pure breed white mouse. Black and white. All F1 first generation offsprings were black, given that the allele for black color is in mice is A, capital A, and that for white color is small a. Right, the genotypes of the parents. The genotypes are just the genetic makeups. So for black mouse, pure black mouse, it means we shall have that both dominant genes. In this case, we shall have AA, capital, and the white mouse will have AA, small letters, white, black, black. Give the genotype of first generation. When these cross with each other, their first generation, the offspring, the firstborn, may be heterozygous, meaning that offspring receive A from the black parent and D from the white parent. So you have AA throughout, AA, capital A and capital small a, meaning that they will have they'll be predominantly black. So the gene controlling the white color will be recessive over the one for black. State the genetic term that can be used to describe the F1 offspring. So this combination is what is called heterozygous or hybrid. Welcome, learners. Question number 9. Discuss any 5 adaptations of the respiratory structures. The respiratory structures are the structures responsible for gaseous exchange in organisms, in mammals, in humans, in insects, in fish, and many other organisms. So all respiratory structures or surfaces have adaptations that are common. All right, so one of them is that the surfaces are large. The respiratory structures are large surfaces. Structures such as alveoli in lungs in humans, gills, filaments in fish, and tracheas in insects are highly folded, branched, and numerous. This increases surface area. So this characteristic increases the total area available for gas exchange, in the process allowing maximum amounts of oxygen and carbon dioxide to diffuse across the surface in a given time, meeting the body's high demand for gas exchange. So large surface area to increase the total area available for gas exchange. That's 2 marks. Remember, this is an essay type of question. You don't put bullets, just write paragraphs. So this is the first paragraph, 2 marks. Another adaptation is that the walls are thin. They have thin walls or thin epithelium. Respiratory surfaces, whether you're looking at lungs in humans, gills in fish, or tracheas in insects, are only 1 or 2 cells thick. This reduces the diffusion distance for gases, so oxygen and carbon dioxide move across the membrane very quickly and efficiently, ensuring a rapid exchange between the air, water, and the blood for body tissues. 2 marks. They are also moist. The surfaces are moist. So the exchange surface is always kept moist by mucus in lungs, fluids in gills, so that gases can only diffuse when dissolved in a liquid. Moisture allows oxygen and carbon dioxide to dissolve, making diffusion possible and smooth. 2 marks. They are rich in blood supply because they have a dense network of capillaries, so respiratory organs are surrounded by many tiny blood vessels. This ensures that as soon as oxygen diffuses in, it is carried away by blood and carbon dioxide is brought to the surface to be removed by exhalation. So this maintains a steep concentration gradient which speeds up and keeps diffusion going continuously. Welcome, learners. My name is Mr. Pochilola, your teacher. 2 marks again. The surfaces are permeable, meaning that membranes of the respiratory structures are freely permeable to oxygen and carbon dioxide. This allows the gases to pass through easily without resistance, ensuring that exchange can happen freely according to the differences in concentration. Welcome, learners. So find a way of shortening these if you want to. If you cannot fully write these like the way I've done here, you can consider shortening them as long as you mention an adaptation and how it supports respiratory process. So if, for example, here you can say large surface area to increase surface area for gas exchange. That's 2 marks. Thin walls in order to reduce the diffusion distance for gases. That's 2 marks. Moist surfaces to dissolve gases for diffusion of gases. 2 marks. Rich blood supply to maintain, or rather to ensure that ensure smooth transportation of gases, and that the surfaces are permeable, allowing oxygen and the carbon dioxide to exchange without resistance. Welcome, learners. Number 10. Describe any 5 ways in which cholera outbreak can be controlled in your community. Again, this is an essay question, therefore the answers must be written in paragraph form without numbering the paragraphs or putting bullets, just paragraphs. So one of the ways is to treat water. How can we control ways? Describe in 5 ways in which cholera outbreak can be controlled. Controlling cholera. So treat all water sources with chlorine or boil water before drinking it to kill Vibrio cholerae. Remember, Vibrio cholerae is the bacteria that causes cholera. So boil the water to kill bacteria before consuming it. Construct proper latrines, toilets far from water sources and ensure human waste is disposed of safely so it does not leak into rivers, lakes, wells, or groundwater. Use of toilets, latrines. Teach and enforce regular hand washing with soap and clean water, especially before eating, after using the toilet, and after handling food to prevent it transferring bacteria to the mouth. Identify cases quickly, separate. This is also called quarantine. Separate patients from others and give oral rehydration salts or medical treatment to reduce spread and save lives. As infected people pass out large numbers of bacteria in their stool. Find ways of shortening this. Make sure that you don't lose out marks from each one of them. Remember, each carries 2 marks. Lastly, do some campaigns, civic education, to explain to people how cholera spreads, its symptoms and prevention methods, so people understand the risks and follow safe practices like eating well-cooked food and avoiding raw or unwashed vegetables. Education, eh? Yeah, so these written properly, find your own ways of shortening these so that you can still maintain the number of marks to be gotten from each one of them. My name is Mr. Paul Chilola once again, your teacher. Lastly, describe the process of insulin production by genetic engineering. Genetic engineering with respect to production of insulin involves a number of stages. All right, so the first and foremost step is for us to code genes. So the gene that codes for human insulin is identified and removed from human pancreatic cells. Or it can also be synthesized artificially in the lab. So this gene carries the instructions for making insulin protein. By saying these 2 points, you have 2 marks. A small circular piece of DNA, which is called plasmid, is extracted from the bacteria. Usually from a bacteria called E. coli, in short. Escherichia coli. When short, just E. coli if you are not able to pronounce this as I'm doing. So small circular piece of DNA called the plasmid is extracted from bacterium. This plasmid acts as a carrier or vector to transfer the human gene into bacterial cells. So both the human insulin gene and the plasmid DNA are cut using the same restriction enzymes. This enzyme cuts the DNA at specific points, producing what are called complementary stick ends short, exposed sections that match each other to marks. The human insulin gene is placed into the open plasmid. An enzyme which is called DNA ligase is used to join the stick ends together, forming a recombinant DNA molecule that now contains human genetic material. Lastly, the recombinant plasmid is inserted back into the bacterial cells. These bacteria are now described as genetically modified or transgenic bacteria because they contain DNA from another species. So this is given to people with sugar problems. Welcome learners, my name is Mr. Pochilola. I represent Black Slides Online. It has been wonderful to be with you to revise this paper from St. Mary's in Somba. Wishing you a beautiful evening. Bye bye for now.